If you're happy with the same old ways of dating,
If you enjoy sucking at communication,
and you have no desire to improve your romantic life, then our podcast might not be for you.
but if you want some out-of-the-box ideas to deepen your current relationships,
broaden your sexual horizons,
develop a better understanding of yourself,
or learn more about non-monogamy,
Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jase,
I'm Emily.
and I'm Dedeker.
and this is the Multiamory podcast.
Songs I know I did, forcing me to form myself to fit.
On this episode of the Multiamory podcast, we are talking about love languages. That's right, we're talking about the different ways that people communicate their affection and communicate to other people how they feel about them, why they appreciate them, how they appreciate them, and then also how we like to receive those languages, which is a really important part of it. This is something that I've actually been talking about this now with a number of different partners, and Dedeker and I just spent the last 2 hours talking about this pretty much. So we're excited to talk about this topic. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So, the love languages theory was started by Gary Chapman. Is he a Dr. Gary Chapman? He's just a regular Gary Chapman.
No, he's a doctor from.
Oh, he's a doctor?
from a seminary school.
Oh, so
But-
it's like a
but he is
like
a PhD.
God doctor.
He's a PhD.
He's a God doctor, Gary Chapman.
Yeah, God Doctor
Okay, got it.
Gary Chapman.
Okay, yeah. So God Dr. Gary Chapman, all the way back in 1995,
This is the best title ever. I want to go back to school so I can be called
become a God
God
doctor.
Doctor.
Anyway, as I was saying, God Dr. Gary Chapman
Yep.
in 1995 released this book called The 5 Love Languages
Mhm.
and took off like freaking wildfire.
Yep.
Sold like hotcakes in a wildfire.
Okay, all right, we'll go with it.
Yeah. No, super popular. I mean, I think to this day it still gets on like the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, totally.
It's still, going strong.
And there's a
But
bunch
of course,
of spin-off books that he's written too.
Yes, as a result of its popularity, like
Yeah.
God Dr. Gary Chapman has built an entire empire. Like there's the 5 love languages like for your teenage kids. There's the 5 love languages for the single person. He's gone on to
Yeah.
create theories about actually languages of apology and languages of appreciation. The languages of apology one is actually quite interesting. It's kind of like different ways that people can accept apologies and like what's more meaningful to them. Is it more meaningful to be like, hey, I'm sorry, and in the future I'll be better? Or to say, hey, I'm sorry, I acknowledge that this is the thing that I did and I'm sorry for that? Or is it better to say like, hey, I'm sorry, and I'm going to do this thing to make it up to you? So like kind of all these subtle differences in ways that people receive apologies that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the background is that, this comes from an evangelical pastor. And so the book is not necessarily accessible to everybody for those reasons. However,
And there's even some
theory-
stuff that he says in some anecdotes or in interviews that we just blatantly are like, that's kind of terrible to say. So like we're this is sort of our disclaimer here that there's also
so
I think you were about to say that there's no research backing this up at all. Right.
yeah, there's no research backing it up, but I mean, a lot of people have, obviously the book is super popular. A lot of people do attest to the fact that like thinking about their communication in this way has really opened up their eyes and has really like affected their relationships. And I would count myself as one of those people.
Yeah, I would too.
That like in learning about the theory of different love languages, like it really has kind of unlocked different ways to think about my relationships and different strategies to try for creating intimacy and for getting through to my partners. It's not necessarily like the only theory or the only strategy that I will employ when I'm trying to communicate love or affection to my partners. However, it has been one that I do think about a lot and that I think actually is quite useful for people to know about.
Yeah, definitely. So with those disclaimers out of the way, let's talk a little bit about why this is something that is useful. Like, how has this affected our lives in terms of how we communicate with our partners?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that as far as it applies to being in polyamorous relationships, I know in polyamorous relationships, you tend to spend a lot of time being very reassuring. You know, I mean, obviously it depends on kind of the security of the people in a particular relationship, but like if your partner's feeling insecure, like the best strategy for that is offering like reassurance and offering love and offering affection, you know. And I found that knowing a person's love language, like knowing your partner's love language and being able to offer them reassurance in their language goes so much further.
Yeah.
You know, because like for instance, for one partner, like if their love language, which we'll get into later in the episode, breaking down each one, if they respond to words of affirmation, if they respond to kind of verbal reassurance, that goes very far for me to just kind of verbally reassure them, like, no, like you're special and I love you and like this is what I appreciate about you. Versus with another partner, that may not go as far, or they may not just feel that, or it may not be as meaningful to them.
And at risk of sounding a little bit too utilitarian or a little too like life hackery, also like something that comes up a lot in polyamory is this idea that love is infinite, but time is finite, that you only have so much time. And so with this too, it's if not only for yourself, but also for your partners, what are the things that we can do together that are most going to have them feel loved, like most have them value that time that we have together, since it's not infinite, and maybe I am splitting that between other partners, or they are with me. Like, how can I get the most sort of that affection that I want? By knowing their love language and them knowing yours can help you to kind of maximize that and really get all those good feelings that you want to get from the time that you do have together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So with that, I mean, let's hop into it.
Yeah.
So God Dr. Gary Chapman, which it's always what he is now.
I have
That's
a
his
question.
title now.
Is there any school I could go to become Poly Dr. Jase Lindgren? Like God Dr. Gary Chapman?
You want to be Poly Doctor?
Well, I don't know.
To get an official title?
Well, to get a PhD from someplace that you would call me Poly Doctor.
You'd have to go to some kind of like sex education credentialing school, and then I think that you could get away with.
Okay, wait.
Because people get called like sex doctor so and so, like Dr. Ruth.
That's true.
I think you'd have to do that, and then you could pull off being Poly Doctor Jase Lindgren.
What if we started a religion out of Multiamory and then created a seminary school, and then I could get a PhD from there?
I see zero flaws in this plan.
Okay, great.
Let's execute.
Perfect. Done.
Okay.
All right. Moving on. So there are 5 love languages as identified by God Dr. Gary Chapman. Quick overview. Those 5 are acts of service, words of affirmation, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. So we're going to go through these one at a time. And then at the end, we're going to talk about some ways that this uniquely applies to polyamory, which I like to think that God Dr. Gary Chapman would be really stoked that we're applying this to polyamory. That's great.
Or just really scandalized and think that we're destroying his beautiful
I'm pretty sure that his
brainchild.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that as a pastor at the Calvary Baptist Church in North Carolina, he would be stoked about how much love we are helping to share his languages with. Yes. All right, great. So let's start with the first one, is acts of service.
Okay, acts of service. Honestly, I hate that it's called acts of service, because that just makes me think of like volunteering at a soup kitchen. Not that I hate the idea of volunteering at a soup kitchen, but it I don't know, the image is like not very sexy to me. Yeah, but I think in practice, it's much more sexy.
Well, sure. Yeah. So like for whatever reason, the big one that comes to mind for me for this is my stepdad, actually, is someone who, once I like learned about love languages and took the little online quiz and was thinking about it, I was like, oh, shit, like that's his for sure. And it was an interesting one because that's not a high one for me or for my mom. And so that was, sort of an issue of conflict, that like he would do this thing that like didn't mean as much to us, but to him was like his way of showing love. And so that one kind of really resonated with me in terms of like how important understanding this kind of stuff is.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously it's, seems pretty self-explanatory. Acts of service includes things like just doing things for your other partner. It could be going to run errands for them. Or, I mean, like, what other examples? Like,
well, a lot of the examples are like doing something for you when you're busy. It's like you're busy and stressed at work, so they like clean the house for you, or they prepare dinner, or they like, or you're sick and they like run out and get you things, when you're sick, or something like that. It's kind of like helping you out when you're sort of not able to do it yourself. Or I suppose maybe you just don't know how to do it yourself. Like maybe they fix your car if you don't know how to do that, or they help you with your taxes, or like something like that like they might have a knowledge that you don't, or a skill that you don't, that act of service is an important way of you, like that makes you feel really important to someone if they're willing to put that time and effort into doing something for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I found, I mean, like, we were just talking about this a lot, that recently, because I've been spending more time with a particular partner of mine whose love language is really heavily, very strongly, intensely acts of service, that it's really made me adjust to receiving that a lot more and finding a lot more meaning in that. At the same time, but I think that is also a more recent thing, like, because what comes to mind is like when I was finishing up the book manuscript, and Jase and I were spending a lot of time together during that process. Like anytime he did something, like whether it was like, okay, like I'll research this for you, or even if it's like, okay, well, I'll go get coffee for you. It was just like, oh my God, like such a relief. Like meant so much to me. Kind of just based on the circumstances of that, of being super busy and super stressed and really preoccupied.
Wow.
That it kind of, that it kind of shook up necessarily what my love language was at that particular moment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that segues nicely into my number one love language, which is words of affirmation. So just hearing you talk about how much you appreciated that, I'm feeling all tickled and
tickled.
Good now, and glad that I was able to help with your glossary and bibliography and links and all those things. Right. So words of affirmation, this one is also pretty self-explanatory. I mean, really all of these are pretty self-explanatory. But it's really conveying to someone what you appreciate about them. And one thing that's important to note about this, just in general, about expressing appreciation for people, is being specific. Like in that example, Dedeker was talking about something very specific that I did. Or like if I receive a compliment from a partner, that's a very specific compliment. It's like, I really like, the way that you, like phrase things in a way that's like very well thought out, even as you're just figuring something out when we're talking about something serious, and that makes me feel really safe to talk to you. Or like, super specific. That was like the
longest compliment I've ever heard in my life.
That's hardly the longest compliment you've ever heard in your life. It's
up there.
You've been dating me for 3 years. I'm sure you've heard longer, more complicated compliments. Right. But so it's like being very specific and being very unique to that person, that it's not just sort of a general, like, I love you, or just a general, even though those are great too, but it's kind of being really specific, but doing it verbally, whether it's written and it could be things, or out loud.
Yeah, it could be compliments, it could be compliments on their appearance, or maybe something encouraging if they're struggling, or, being verbally supportive if they're kind of having a rough time, or expressing that, you're proud of your partner for accomplishing something. Just that, lots of all verbally based positive things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on that subject, we're going to take a quick break. That if you would like to verbally or otherwise, show us your appreciation and
Because
affirm us.
we both respond to words of affirmation.
Definitely.
For sure.
Words of affirmation is a
Yeah.
big one for both of us.
Uh-huh.
And receiving gifts is a big one for Emily. And this ties into that as well. We're going to talk about that one more later. But that is that if you appreciate what we do on this show, we have a few ways that you could really help us out and really support us to keep going on this and let us know that you do appreciate what it is that we do. And the first of those is to become one of our contributors on Patreon. So Patreon, patreon.com, patreon.com/multiamory is our site there. And it is a place where you can pledge a certain amount of money to our podcast every month. And this doesn't have to be a ton of money. It could be as little as just $1. And in different tiers, we have different rewards, like our online video discussion group that we have every month, which we just had our first one of those this last weekend. And we also have our private Facebook group. And then also just having access to our Patreon feed where we post fun pictures of, Dedeker with a bunch of cats, or me and my cosplay from Comic-Con, or, or Emily and I at a recording studio, right? Like all sorts of things like that. So it's something that we'd really appreciate it. And it is the most direct way that you can help support our show and help us to keep doing what we're doing. And we really appreciate that. Another thing that you could do is to check out our newer sponsor, which is audible.com. And you can do that by going to audibletrial.com/multiamory. And Audible is a source for audiobooks. It's got a giant selection of audiobooks out there. And
huge
you can get a free trial for a month if you sign up at audibletrial.com/multiamory. And there, during that free month, you'll get one free credit for an audiobook, which you could get whatever audiobook you want. If you are planning a road trip sometime soon, it would be a great opportunity to try it out. Or if you do a job like me, that sometimes you're doing more tedious things, it's nice. An audiobook is a great thing instead of trying to watch a TV show or something like that. I'm a big fan of it.
If you have a really long commute to work.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because a lot of people listen to our podcast when they're commuting to work.
Yeah, that's true. But we only come out once a week.
If you've listened to all of our podcasts and the rest of the time you need to fill up with an audiobook, definitely check out Audible. Yeah,
definitely. They've got all sorts of great stuff there. Dedeker and I both use a fair amount of our credits getting like philosophical books from like Alan Watts of the Tao Te Ching.
I just downloaded like a series of lectures from Eckhart Tolle.
Right. All that sort of stuff is on there. Like lectures and classes, like college classes are on there, in addition to, all the books and novels. And, if you want to listen to 50 Shades of Grey, you could do that too.
Why the heck not?
Sadly, they don't have that.
Can we just give a disclaimer
Gottfried
that we're like
version.
not officially endorsing that book?
Which book? 50 Shades of Grey?
50 Shades of Grey.
We're also not officially endorsing the Love Languages book.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
We don't endorse shit.
We don't endorse shit.
Except for Audible. Go check out Audible.
Yes, go check out Audible and get whatever books you want. Yes, it's great. I've been a big fan of it for a long time. And if you go there just for trying the free trial, just for trying the trial at all, they will help support our show. And that's something that we would really appreciate from you guys. And then the last thing that you could do is take a little bit of time and write us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or iHeartRadio, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, wherever it is you check us out, write us a review. It'll help more people to find us, help us show up higher in search results, and it will help us to know what it is that you appreciate about the show for us to keep doing that. Thank you so much.
Okay, time to hop back in?
Yes. Bring us back in.
Okay, so the third one that we'll get to is receiving gifts. And now for Jase and I, this is, for both of us, it's the lowest one that we respond to. Emily, though, is definitely a receiving gifts.
Yes.
Fluent language person.
Like,
She's
I'd say
into
that's
that.
her native language.
both giving and receiving gifts. Like not like I'm not saying Emily's just like a freeloader.
Right. No, she's one of the best gift givers I've ever known.
She's also
Like,
one of the best gift givers
in terms
ever,
of
seriously.
getting big, like significant gifts for people, but also like really well thought out gifts that are really
very like a lot of thought goes into her gift giving.
Yes. And this is something that like Dedeker was talking about with being with a partner who acts of service is a big thing for him. That's kind of made her value that higher. In the time that I've known Emily and when I was with her, like I really learned to appreciate both giving and receiving gifts in a way that is not as normal for me. Because I came to understand, partly through the love languages, that is something really important to her. And so when I would receive a gift from her, it wouldn't be my normal reaction of receiving a gift, but it like had an extra meaning because I knew that was her primary love language. And then Dedeker, you were bringing up the interesting point of a gift doesn't have to be a physical thing.
Yeah, well, that was my question, is because like I know that for myself, I think I respond to gifts that are experiential more so than tangible.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea of someone buying me like, hey, here's tickets to a concert versus, hey, here's like a PS4. I mean, like both of those things are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like I totally agree, both of those things are awesome. But for some reason, like I feel a little more inner excitement about the like, hey, I bought you tickets to a concert versus, hey, I bought you a PS4.
Right. That it's about an experience.
Yeah.
Or you were saying like
so
even like a nice dinner or a spa day
even
or
something that's like, hey, like I'm gonna take you out to just a fancy dinner, or hey, I'm gonna buy you like as a bottle of wine is tangible.
Is it though? But it's not something you keep. It's not the same as like,
yeah, exactly.
I bought you a painting that you're gonna keep. It's like a thing you consume and you experience it and then it's done. But yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, so
the
receiving
next one?
gifts is that, and it's kind of about like that thought you put into the gifts is part of the expression of love. And that's an important thing to understand for people who, receiving gifts is a big thing for them.
And part of it is also, again, with the gifts thing, I think the emphasis is that it doesn't have to be big gifts like a PS4 or concert tickets or whatever, that it can also be just like teeny tiny gifts that someone picks up for you in the course of their normal day.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like hey, I was thinking of you and got you this thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
What's the next one?
Okay. The next one is quality time. So quality time is also one that scored pretty highly for Dedeker and myself. And so this one, I think, is actually the one that needs the most explanation of the 5 to really clarify what quality time is. And this is actually something that we've talked about before on this podcast, because it does relate to this idea of, one of the fears people have when opening up a relationship is that they're going to have less time with their partner. Or, maybe you have a partner who's upset about feeling like they're getting less of you now. And part of that can be helped at least with spending that time as quality time. And what that means is that it's time that's really dedicated to being together or doing something together. That it's not just, hey, we're both working and we're in the same place. Or it's not just like, hey, let's hang out and like you'll read a book and I'm going to play video games or something like that. Like, I love that kind of time, but that's
still, according to God, Dr. Gary Chapman, that can still fall under quality time. Like that people can really respond to this idea of like, I just like being around the person that I love, even if we're not like doing something specific together, even if we're not like going out to the movies or going out to dinner. But I think like that differentiates from like, hey, we're going to spend time together, but like we're going to do housework together.
Yeah, okay. I guess you're right. I should clarify. So yeah, like watching a TV show or a movie or playing games together or something, like that is quality time, but not if it's like, hey, I'm going to, work on our taxes for this year while we hang out. Or like, hey, let's hang out during my lunch break, but I'm going to be working during it or something like that, right? So yeah, it's kind of about sort of setting that time aside to be with your partner, regardless of what it is that you're doing. Yeah. Or like for myself and Dedeker in a long distance relationship, it's about setting time aside to be on Skype, or or to actually talk with each
to
other.
be on Skype when we're not trying to plan out recording a podcast. Because that's the thing is like we actually spend like a decent amount of time together, but it's trying to find the time that is like when we're both just like relaxed and don't want to talk about like business stuff or stuff for Multiamory, or talk about like super serious stuff, like when we can just like be silly and relaxed and maybe
hang
like
out.
watch a movie or
like watch YouTube clips together or something. Yeah, definitely.
But that's something that like we've had to be very conscientious about to make sure that time gets structured in and doesn't get lost in the like, well, whatever, like I'll talk to you tomorrow when we're recording the podcast.
Right, exactly.
Recognizing that it's different.
Yeah, totally. I think that's also, just as a side note, is important for when people live together. Like that's
definitely.
For us, like working together essentially is one trap, and I think living together is another one where it's like, well, I'm gonna see you tonight when I get home, rather than like, hey, let's actually make time to be together, regardless of what it is we're doing.
Yeah.
All right, so the last one of the 5 is physical touch. This one is also very high for me, and it's any kind of it's hand holding, it's cuddling, it's a hug or a kiss,
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to include any kind of sexual touch.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just that, like, this is one that I notice for myself kind of even more with certain friends, that it's like if a friend will like put their arm around me or like I don't know, it sounds so weird, but like
pat your bottom,
pat me on the back or something, or just sort of like make a physical contact of some sort, even just in that kind of playful way, it like makes me feel like, oh, that's awesome. Like I feel really like cared about, like that friend really feels feelings for me. Anyway, yeah, it's something I've noticed. I've noticed it actually lately, especially at work with like some of my work friends. Cause work isn't a place where you're going to be like, cuddling and holding hands and whatever, but like if someone does, they're sort of standing next to me and like touches me like with their arm a little bit, and it's just like, hey, like how's it going, how you feeling, or like puts their arm around me just for a second to give a little side hug or something, like I find I'm like, oh, that's really awesome, like it makes me feel very appreciated.
Interesting.
So
something that God Dr. Gary Chapman does emphasize with physical touch.
Sorry, it makes me laugh every time you say his name. I love it.
I can't go back now.
Yeah. Okay. Go on.
So what God Dr. Gary Chapman does emphasize with the physical touch is that it's also feeling free and feeling comfortable to give and receive physical touch with your partner when you're in public and when you're around other people. That's actually another part of this, that it's not like, oh, you're just affectionate with me when we're like in bed or when we're at home and it's just the two of us, but also like when we're out with our friends or with each other's families, that we do feel comfortable touching each other. And Jase, we experienced something very different in different cultures, particularly when we were in Japan.
I just wanted to tell a little story because physical affection is not something you do in Japan.
No
something
couples, they do in Japan.
No married couples do it. No one does it. Some young
I know, like
kids
you
do.
and I would be on the subway together, and like even like holding your hand, like putting my arm around your waist, like I could feel people staring.
It felt like
really
we
weird.
were like making out and feeling each other up on the train.
Exactly.
The story was I was listening to a dialogue in my Japanese lessons about a guy who got married, and his friend is asking him like, oh, how was the wedding? What was that like? And the comment the guy gives is like, oh man, it was really like weird and uncomfortable and embarrassing to have to kiss in public at their wedding. I was just like, that's
weird.
That sums up my impression of kind of how Japan approaches physical affection. They're like at your wedding.
So funny,
like that's the uncomfortable part. Is having to kiss
Japan,
in public.
The only time that I've ever seen people be affectionate to each other is if they're teenagers.
Yep.
Like if they're teenagers and like the only place they have is to like make out on the train.
Right.
Maybe, but even then, not even making out.
No,
just,
it
like,
wouldn't even
like
be on the
cuddling.
train. It would be like maybe like on a sort of a side street, maybe. More likely than a train. Yeah.
Yeah. The only other time I've ever seen it is again on like a side street when people are drunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even
when
if
they
they're
drink.
drunk, it's not
Yeah.
even like
Yeah.
super intense making out, just like
Mhm.
kind of playful cuddling
Yeah.
or play fighting or whatever. Yeah.
Like when we went out on Christmas Eve, that was like one of the only times I saw a bunch of people holding hands, because it was all these kind of young
Oh,
couples
right.
out on their dates. I was like, wow.
On their Christmas Eve dates, which is also a Japanese
That's
thing.
a Japanese thing, yeah. Anyway, so they do vary by culture, but yes, this is God. Dr. Gary Chapman is writing this more from a kind of Western American sort of approach. Cool. All right. So now we're gonna bring it on back around to the polyamory.
Bring it on back around. Yeah. So this is the thing: is like if you do have multiple partners, obviously it's so important to learn how to juggle multiple love languages.
Mhm.
You need to become a love language polyglot.
Yeah, you've been waiting this whole half hour to make that
I have.
one.
It's so perfect. It's so perfect.
Yes.
And it's true. Like you really do. You really do. You know,
Mhm.
like when you're in a monogamous relationship, even though an individual will respond to multiple love languages, that is true. However, when you have one partner, you have a lot of time and dedication in order to figure out like, okay, I know this is this person's love language, and so I can really perfect my ability to speak to that person in their love language.
Right.
When you have multiple partners, like you got to get good at multiple love languages very fast. You have to learn to be really flexible.
Yeah.
And sometimes even if like you're not even aware of it, you will find yourself adjusting, as we've shared with you that, like when Jase was in a relationship with Emily, that like that adjusted for him, even though he didn't normally respond to receiving gifts. Like when he realized that was her love language, it changed how he felt about it. Like my feelings with my partner recently have changed because of the fact of like how much more acts of service is a more present love language. Like you will find yourself kind of fitting into the mold of these different relationships, which I think is actually a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the goal would be that it would allow you to find ways to, appreciate all the different love languages more, so that not only do you get better at giving them, but you also get better at receiving them. And understanding that maybe if someone's giving you a lot of gifts and that's not a major love language for you, and you might feel like, well, I don't know if this person really cares about me because they don't, spend as much quality time or give as much physical touch in public as I would normally want. Kind of realizing, oh, but these gifts they give me or these little acts of service they do, like that is big for them. And so kind of understanding how to interpret the love languages as well as give them.
And it's really important also to figure out what your own love languages are. And in our write-up, we'll include a link. There's like a really handy little quiz on God Dr. Gary Chapman's site.
Takes less than like 10 minutes. Yeah.
Because it can be important for you to learn, how do I communicate to my partner what my love language is?
Yeah.
And so that might be something where it's like, okay, well, I know that words of affirmation, like I respond really well to, I know that's my love language. And so when my partner does give me words of affirmation, I know to like really encourage that, to really be like, you know what? Like when you said that really made me feel good.
Sure. Yeah.
Being able to kind of respond with your reactions appropriately versus just coming to your partner and being like, hey, by the way, like words of affirmation, do it.
Well, I think that the beauty of there being a short little quiz for this too is that it's sort of a fun conversation thing too. Like the thing that brought this up for me was just within the last couple weeks, my partner Mochi, was like, hey, do you know what your love language is? I was like, it's been a couple years since I took that quiz. Like, let me take it again. So I just took that real quick, and then we talked about it and compared our results. And then I ended up talking about it that same day with another partner, being like, oh, hey, Mochi just asked me about my love language. Do you know what yours is? Like, this is mine. And it led to a conversation there. And then a few days later, I went on a third date. And during the date, part of the conversation I brought up was just like, oh, hey, I've been talking with a couple other partners about love languages. Do you know what yours are? And she didn't really know much about it. So I kind of got to explain about love languages. And she's like, like, I think mine might be this. But yeah, I want to go take that quiz. It's just kind of a fun thing to do that's not like a thing you do by yourself, just sort of meditative, but it's a good thing to talk to your partner about, because, then you'll understand what theirs are and they'll understand what yours are, and you'll kind of both be on the same page about wanting to engage more with each other's love languages.
Yeah, so like I said, we'll include the link. I'd recommend you go check out the quiz. You can check out God Dr. Gary Chapman's book if you're comfortable being exposed to like very evangelical monogamous advice on relationships.
Yeah.
Not to completely discredit it,
And
but
very
just so you know that
heteronormative,
will be there
gender binary,
in the book. Yeah,
all
that'll
sorts
be
of that
very,
stuff. Yeah.
very present in the book.
Very present.
Yes.
Or you can just listen to our episode again. Just put it on repeat. And
yeah, perfect.
clearly that's all the knowledge you could get. Or join us in next month's discussion group by joining us on Patreon, becoming one of our patrons there, and then bring it up in the next discussion group, and we can all talk more about love languages, or in the private Facebook group that's for patrons only. Lots of fun things to do there. All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate you in all 5 of these ways.
Yeah, if we could touch you, we would.
Yeah.
We want to give you this gift / act of service of us recording the podcast for you.
Yes.
We're so glad that you've chosen to take this quality time to hang out with us and listen to us.
Yes.
Like, we feel really appreciated, and we hope that we're able to extend that appreciation and love to you guys as well.
Yes, definitely. And you can send us words of affirmation to our email at info@multiamory.com, on Twitter @multiamory, or on Facebook, Multiamory. We look forward to hearing from you. All right. Thank you so much. We will see you next week.
Sayonara.
Bye.